And the guests that we bring on are usually connected in some ways to jazz, jazz fusion, jazz crossover. It includes jazz reggae, jazz soul, jazz pop, jazz rock, jazz gospel, anything that connects to jazz in some way. Um, we've had a succession of wonderful, important, and long-term legends on our show that have really been terrific guests and have brought a lot of wonderful music to everybody and continue to make music today. So what I want to do is introduce you in a minute to someone I think you're going to find fascinating. It's a departure from what we usually do. We usually have a front man who plays a musical instrument and has their own band and has done solo recordings for quite a number of years, or we have a vocalist who is also a band leader and had a solo career too. This week we're departing. The special guest we have on is probably one of the all-time great background singers that many of you may or may not know about, and now he's starting his own career as a single and a front man. And so I want to introduce you to someone as my special guest today. He's been a singer, songwriter, vocal contractor, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about that so you understand more about what a vocal contractor is. He's been an active member of the music industry for well over 25 years. He was signed as a 14-year-old by Quincy Jones to Qwest Records. His resume includes touring and performing with legendary musical acts, including Quincy Jones, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Beyonce, Lalah Hathaway, who he's now on tour with, Mariah Carey, I mentioned Mariah, I'm sorry, Rahsaan Patterson, Rachelle Ferrell, David Foster, Justin Bieber, John Legend, Penny Latimore. I can go on and on. There's dozens of others also. So without further ado, let me bring on our special guest this week, Jason Morales. Jason, welcome.
Mel, I'm so pleased to be here with you. Thank you for the welcome. And the
well, you've got a resume that's unparalleled.
Yes. Some of those names that you mentioned, I've worked with. I haven't toured with all the names that you mentioned.
Right.
But I've worked with all the names. I've done studio work with
most
of those names, and toured with a good amount of them as well. So it's been a wonderful ride, and I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to thank you for taking time out. I know we had to rearrange the show to an earlier time because you have 2 gigs tonight that you're doing in New York.
This evening. Yes.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everybody what the shows are so they can come out and see you?
Absolutely. I'm on tour currently with Lalah Hathaway, and we are in New York City, and we're playing the City Winery this evening. We have 2 shows. I believe the show times are 6 and 9. So I don't know if they're completely sold out or not yet, but if you can get in, I would advise you to do so. We played that same venue last evening. This is our second night here in New York City, and it was phenomenal. The crowd was amazing. We had so many special guests come through, and it was fantastic.
That's terrific. That's wonderful. Lalah is just spectacular.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great tour to be on. I'm sure you're having a good time with that one too.
Absolutely. The work is hard. We're flying in a lot of these cities on the very days that we're playing because the schedule is so strenuous, but we're giving it everything we have, and we're having a blast.
Yeah. I know you also tour with some of my other friends. I know that you tour. You sing with Mesa occasionally.
Yes, I love Mesa.
I love Macy.
A lot of work on the Capitol Jazz for the Capitol Jazz organization, the cruises and the festival. So I've worked with Macy a number of years. I've gotten a chance to sing with her a bunch of times, even just as recently as on my birthday this year, June 4th. We did at the Capitol Jazz Festival. We were doing a tribute show to Michael Jackson, where she was one of the features, and we got a chance to sing together again. I love Mesa so much; she's amazing.
You should have invited me to that show because my birthday is June 9th.
Oh, really? Okay, You're definitely too. So it was a special day for me. June 4th was my birthday, and also the date of my single release. I released my new single, "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe," on June 4th.
That's what I wanted to have you tell everybody next. what's cooking with you now? I know you started a solo career, and that's your first release. Why don't you tell everybody about what's doing with you and what's forthcoming?
Well, there's so much coming. I have so much in the on the burners. My new single is called "Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Babe." It is a remake of a Barry White song that we all know and love. But I always wanted to remake it in a different way. I had always heard the song a different in a different way. We know the traditional way that Barry sang it, and I remember every time it played how happy it made people. I mean, as soon as you heard "Can't Get Enough of Your," everybody just got up and started dancing and having a good time. But so that feeling always stuck with me. But I started paying attention to the actual lyrics that Barry wrote, and I was like, "These are really, really, really good lyrics. It's actually a love song," and I wanted to showcase the lyric a bit differently. So I put a whole completely different spin on it, and I worked with some of my friends, and I'm a bit spoiled. I've been in this music industry for a long time, and I've been blessed to be around some of the greatest musicians, and I was able to call in some favors, and they all showed up for me. So it's exciting for me. I was a little nervous about it because people don't like when you touch the classics, so this was a bit of a risk, especially as a leading single. But I, no risk, no reward, and I really wanted this to be my first statement to the world as a solo artist. I love how it all came together. I love the musicality of it all, and yeah, that's that's what I got up right now.
Well, it's a great track.
Thank you so much.
And I just want to make a comment. One of the things about doing a cover song, if the cover song is done in the style of the vocalist, not the style of the person that originally sang it, that's really what people want to hear. If they want to hear the original, they go hear the original. And I have a number of friends that are in the music industry for a long time and do cover songs. And when they sing a cover song, typically they make it their own, and oftentimes it's better than the original. I got to tell you, Barry White is a classic, but your version is right up there with it. It's excellent.
Thank you so much. That makes me. I'm so proud of it. I put a lot of love and a lot of time into it, and I had a bit of struggle getting this record recorded. I had to basically do it twice because initially the initial version and who I was working with at that time didn't work out, so I kind of had to start from scratch twice to get this thing going. But I'm so proud. I'm a firm believer that all things work together for the good of them that love God. So I believe in God, clearly. But it really came together just how I wanted it, how I always heard it in the back of my mind, and I couldn't be happier with the product.
Yeah, one of the people that's a good friend I love that does a lot of covers is Macy Gray. And
yes,
when Macy does a cover, it's not like the original, but often it's better.
Yeah, she takes it and makes it hers.
Yeah, and she does everything. She'll do alternative, she'll do gospel. There isn't a genre she doesn't like. And your background is really similar. You performed and worked in the studio with so many different musical genres.
Yes.
So when you move forward on your solo career, you got a lot to offer because you had all this wealth of experience that a lot of solo artists, when they first break out, just don't have.
Yeah.
So
I'm grateful to have had such a well-rounded musical experience. I've been blessed to sing, like you mentioned, with all forms of all different genres of music. From pop to country to rock to rhythm and blues to jazz, funk, every type of genre I've been blessed to sing and to be around and to glean from. So I'm really grateful for that.
there's a term that is part of your background that I've never introduced to audiences on the Power Hour because it's kind of unique in a lot of ways. It's called the contract vocalist. That's been part of your career. Why don't you tell everybody what that is? How that's different from, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, as an independent contractor, I contract vocals for not just my own vocals, but vocalists for television and film as well. And I've worked with some of the major networks. We're talking about ABC, NBC, Fox, Netflix, a lot of the streaming sites as well. So different shows on each of these networks will reach out to me because whatever the scene or whatever the show or whatever the film might need vocal accompaniment or some form of vocal scene at that point. So they reach out to me and they say, this is what we need. And these are the type of singers that we need. And we want you to put everything in place. So I reach out to people and I hear what the producers want. It's very important as a contractor to listen to the client, to make sure that they are always getting exactly what it is that they want by way of talent. And that varies. So, I did, just case in point, I had contracted something for Netflix for a show called Pose. And they wanted very specific things. They wanted a gospel quartet type choir, and then they wanted a children's choir, which are two completely different things, but very specific to what they wanted. And it's basically going through and it's a puzzle and putting the right pieces together and the right voice together to create ultimately the right sound so that the client gets exactly what they need.
That I'm so glad you explained this because it's very complex.
Yes.
And it's not like you're only in one lane. You're in the lane that you're asked to become. So you have to be incredibly versatile, and I'm sure that that's just something that's very difficult. I'm sure for a lot of vocalists to be able to change gears that way and be able to adapt on the spot, literally.
Yeah, it really does take a high level of skill. I tend to tell people I feel so spoiled because a lot of my colleagues and friends and people who I have the opportunity to work with, they're the highest caliber musician. I mean, they're the highest caliber of singers that you can call upon. Full range vocalists. They can sing any style of song, any genre, whatever the range requirements are. They can just fit right in. So it is a certain skill set that has that I've worked very hard to acquire myself, but a lot of my colleagues have also done. We're all learned musicians. We've been studying since little kids at the hip, at mama's hip. So I feel blessed in that way.
Look, I think again, it's a very unique talent, and it's a career development process that
Yes.
really puts you into a different space. You're not just performing and singing, but you're reorganizing yourself for almost every gig. Let's go back and talk about this a little bit because I'm just curious.
Okay.
You 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 started out very early in a musical career. At 14,
I did.
you were signed to a record contract by one of probably the giant in the music industry, Quincy Jones.
Q. Q.
Yeah, yeah. So how did that happen, and what led up to that? What was your preparation for that day?
Well, I was signed at the age of 14, but the way that I was found found by Quincy and Qwest Records. I have been singing since I was a young child. I grew up on the church circuit because that's where I first developed my sound. And I was a child prodigy. I would travel all throughout the Northeast. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and I would travel all throughout the Northeast jurisdiction and sing at different church festivals and convocations and different,
Excuse me,
services.
excuse me, Jason, but who organized that for you? You were so young, you couldn't have organized it
Yeah,
yourself. But
you know what? Interestingly enough, I grew up in the church, and so my parents were really influential in always supporting me, always pushing me, always saying, "Go ahead and take that chance." And I remember sometimes I didn't even want to sing, but my dad was like, "I've signed you up for something. You're doing it," and so the exposure came in that way. So when I was very young, I was visiting with family in New York City. Here in New York City, it's I'm where I'm at now. And I was at an aunt's house and she was, I guess, showing me off to her friends. And she said, "You got to hear my nephew sing." And she lived in a big apartment building. And so I, 9 years old, I was just singing my heart out as loud as possible. From out the window, Mel, we hear somebody screaming, "Who is that? Who is that singing? Who is that singing?" And my aunt was like, "That's my nephew. Come on in, hear him sing." It just so happened that the young lady who was asking was a talent scout for the Apollo Theater,
Oh,
Showtime at the Apollo.
goodness.
And so she was like, he's amazing. We got to get him signed up. We got to get him on the show. And shortly thereafter, it worked out. It worked out where I was a feature on Showtime at the Apollo, the kids portion. I was a winner on Showtime at the Apollo. And so that happened a few years after that point. That was when I was 9 years old. I was featured on the Apollo a few times. I was once there at the age of 9 and once at the age of 12. They brought me back because they loved me so much. Few years after that, they I don't know if you remember or not, the Apollo was doing a series called The Best of the Apollo.
Oh yeah, I remember.
They were featuring all the best that Michael Jackson, the Supremes, everybody who's touched the stage. They happened to feature my performance in that series. And so that's how I became affiliated with Qwest, because representatives from that agency saw the Best of show, and they reached out to the Apollo Theater, and Maxine Lewis, who was the rep there, rest her soul, she was such a lovely lady. She was still working for the Apollo at that time, and she still had my contact information, and she made that connection for me, and that's how it happened.
That's so many things sometimes happen serendipitously.
Yeah.
That are so important. Just so important. I don't. Have you ever sang with Jill Scott?
I have not sung with Jill, but I know
Okay.
Jill. Jill's from Philly, so I'm
Yeah.
a PA boy myself. So we all kind of knew each other from back at that time.
Well, you know how she was discovered. She was at a gas station pumping gas at 10 o'clock at night, and she was singing. And who's on the parking lot? A talent scout for one of the big record companies, and heard her sing and said, "I want to sign you," on the spot.
That's how this thing works
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
It's so weird, but it's all about how the stars align. And I'm just really grateful for that opportunity, being at the right place at the right time.
it's wonderful. It's really terrific. So, okay, so now you're 14, you signed to Qwest Records, and you're singing with what group?
I'm singing with a group at that time. We were initially called the Young Americans, but then they changed the name to Youth Asylum, and that's how we were presented to the world. Our first single we had a single called Jasmine. We worked on a full record, which had, we were working with, obviously, Quincy with production. David Foster was producing us at that time, and we worked with Diane Warren was writing some of the songs that we were, so we had a really, 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 really solid foundation. So I was signed to Qwest with that group, and we toured. We did a couple national tours. Tommy Hilfiger at that time was our big sponsor, so he sponsored the tours that we were on, and it was just a really wonderful, fun experience for a young guy who was from Little Town, Pennsylvania, who had no idea that any of this could exist.
It's so fun. It's so funny because if you were 9 years old and you said, "Who would I love to have help develop me?" Quincy Jones, David Foster. What's the chance?
I came out the box with the best. So but it also set my expectations high. I saw how excellent these men were at their craft. And it's something that even back I remember this specifically. I remember I'm a sponge. I've always been one who wants to learn more and glean from everybody. I believe in the power of experience. So I remember being in the studios and watching how these men worked and watching the precision with which they did things. And I just wanted to be that. I wanted to know how to do that, and I wanted to be excellent in the ways that they were excellent. So I worked really, really, really hard developing, even from those early years. It wasn't lost on me, the level of caliber of talent that I was being exposed to at such a young age. My mother was like, "Do you really understand what you're being blessed to do?" So it kept me humble and kept me in a space to learn as much as possible, and it really kind of set my career up for the way that I work now. I believe in excellence. I don't shortchange anything. I work hard, and I
Yeah.
expect everybody who I work with to work as hard as me, if not harder.
There's something you said, Jason, that's really a key. My mother had told me when I was a kid
Yeah,
that the only way to be successful is to know what you don't know.
right.
And that's what you've done. I mean, that's what you took advantage of the people around you to
Yeah,
know what you didn't know. And it's a
yeah.
lot of work.
It's tons of
And
work.
yeah, yeah, and sometimes it's not it doesn't follow the path you like it to follow. So
Right.
resilience is important too, and
Absolutely.
especially with what you were doing. Okay, so tell me more now. Okay, so you with Youth Asylum, you cut the record. What happened
Yes.
next?
So we I that happened in 98. I was with that particular group from 98 to about 2001. We were signed to Quest. Quest Records was a baby branch out of Warner Brothers Records. So they really put as much into us as possible. We were Quest Records answer to the boy bands of that time, which were the Backstreet Boys and the NSYNCs and the 98 Degrees. So we were Quest to that. Um, and we did really well. But in the year 2000, Warner Brothers Records got brand new heads. There was like an overhaul. And so what happened is they started getting rid of a lot of the baby branches, a lot of the baby, record companies. So then in turn, when they kind of disbanded or shut down Quest, we were signed directly to Warner at that time because they saw the benefit in what it is that we were. But we kind of sat dormant for a while. They didn't quite know what to do with us. Eventually, the project got shelved. And, I just went back to Pennsylvania and got right back on the grind, So I was with them from 98 to 2001, moved back to Pennsylvania where I worked back in the church music scene. I was the minister of music for a few churches there in the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. I was a choir director for a few choirs at that time as well. And I did that for a few years before I knew that I always knew that I was going back to Los Angeles because I knew that for what it is that I intended to do, I had to position myself properly. I had to be in the space where I could make those things happen for myself. I was never hard work is just what I always knew. My father worked 3 jobs. My mother worked 2. We were humble beginnings. And so I knew that as soon as I got back to Los Angeles, I was going to hit the ground running. So I relocated back in 2005 and I worked. No, I can't. I mean,
I know.
I got a full-time job because, you have to support yourself. So I had a job in sales that I was working Monday through Friday. I was working 5:45 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. I would get off work, drive home just enough time to change, and then I was right out the door. I was at every open mic. I was at every club, if there was a singing competition, whatever I could do to be seen as a vocalist and to let people know, hey, this is who I am. I was there. And in doing so, I kind of formed a wonderful community family of singers who were like myself on the same path of just trying to let ourselves be known and be heard and try to make our way in the industry. And eventually, some connections happened where I met an artist named Rahsaan Patterson. And I met him literally. We were out at a nightclub, and a friend of mine who I was with, she was friends with Rahsaan, and she introduced me. And I started talking to Rahsaan about music. I was not as familiar with all of his music. I knew a few of his songs because he's in my opinion, one of the greatest male vocalists of our generation, really.
Yes, he
And
is.
I got a chance to talk to him, and I really think that he took to me because he saw an earnest drive in me. So I had a single I had a song that I was working on and I had demoed, and I was like, if you have a few minutes, my car is right here. I would love to play you my single. We can listen to it in the car, and I would love for you to tell me what you think. I never thought he would say yes. He's an established artist, but he's like, sure, I have a couple minutes. I'll sit down with you. So I sat down with Rahsaan in the car, and he listened to the song. He's like, your voice is this song is beautiful. Your voice is absolutely beautiful. So we formed a friendship. Shortly thereafter, I went on the road with a stage play, which was supposed to, I won't even mention the name of the stage play because it was a big flop. But it was supposed to go out for 6 months, which for me, I quit my job because this is what I came off. I came to do music, right? So I quit my full-time job in sales and went on the road, and it was supposed to be a 6-month contract. It lasted a week and a half. And so I came back to California, came back home, and I was like, oh God, what am I going to do? So I'm reaching out to everybody who thought that I would be gone for the next 6 months. And I reached out to Rahsaan and I said, hey, Rahsaan, just let you know I'm back in town if you want to meet up. This thing folded. This was awful, And he said, everything's going to work out. Everything's going to work out. I promise you, everything's going to work out. 2 days later, I get a call from Rahsaan's management, and he says, Rahsaan is going on tour with Lalah Hathaway. They're doing a joint tour, and they're going to share a band. He's going to bring one vocalist. She's going to bring one vocalist, but you guys will sing background for both artists. And in that, I died. I literally died in the moment. He's like, and he wants you to come out on tour and be the vocalist that he brings. So I always take a moment to give respect to Rahsaan because he took a chance on a young man who was really hungry and fighting very hard to get. I get a little emotional about it. Who was really just fighting to get my footing, and he took a chance on me. So that kind of really was the door that opened up because I started singing with Lalah as a result, and she kept me on, and I'm obviously still with her to this very day. That was 2007. And so many opportunities were birthed out of that kind of first experience. I got from the community of singers in Los Angeles who I had kind of formed a family with. We all looked out for each other. So if there was a session, they would call me and I would call them, and it just came a real kind of beautiful family situation. And one gig, when you're excellent at what you do, this is why I stress excellence. When you're excellent at what you do, it will always open up another situation, open up another door of opportunity for you. And that's just kind of how my career started. And it has been rolling since then, working with some of the people who, like I said, where I was singing in those clubs with. Now we're singing on records with Walter Afanasieff, who's calling as a producer, and he wants us to sing on his records. And, it just, the names just start coming in. It just became a whirlwind. And so that's kind of how it's been for me. And there have been good times and bad times, and there have been a lot of hard times where work was not as present. But you just keep fighting.
Well, in a sense, you really have had at least 3 different careers. One is being a studio vocalist. Yes. One is being a touring vocalist. The other, you've been in TV, yes. And movies. So, it's really almost 3 separate careers because they're not the same. So, yeah. So what was the first one? Was the first one touring or studio?
For me, I had started studio because when I was young and first signed, we went right into the studio, right into recording the records. That was before any touring experience. That's before I was performing on major stages. Now, I will say that as a young child prodigy, I had been singing in church scenes for since the age of 3. So I was familiar with standing on the stage and singing, but standing on the stage and singing and actually performing on the stage singing are 2 very completely different things, and they require a lot different. Okay, so I started studio which then afforded me the opportunity to hit the road touring. And that was a lesson in and of itself, because you're thrown into these situations and you really have to sell yourself to these audience. They don't know who you are. And why should I listen to you? You know, so you have to become a performer.
When you were with Youth Asylum and after you did the recording, I'm sure the A&R people put you on the road to open for certain
Yes.
other.
Yeah, we
And
were
yeah,
we went on tour with an artist back at that time called Michael Frito, and uh, he was affiliated heavily with the Hilfiger family, Tommy Hilfiger,
gotcha.
and again, so that's kind of how that worked out. So Quest worked out the negotiations where we were to open for Michael Frito on a couple national tours, and we did what at that time were mall tours, which is where you would go and they would have a stage in the center of the mall and it'd be set up in front of like a Dillard's or, you know, and so we went and we performed and we were opening for Michael, and it was a boy band, and we were young, cute, energetic, young, good
Yeah,
sounding kids. And so the audiences, they would react very positively, and they loved us. And so it became a situation where we were getting such a great response that Michael Frito, who we were opening for, was not getting such as big of a response. So he gave up his headlining slot to open for us by the end of that tour.
wow.
So that's the hustle. You gotta drive. You gotta make these people want you and believe in what it is that you're presenting. And so that's that was a school. That was a hard knock school, because you deal with a lot of things on the road, things that you will never otherwise have experienced. All the traveling, all the planes, all the
Sure.
tour buses, and the tight schedules, the lack of sleep. Also at that time I was still young, so I was finishing my high school education at that time. I was doing an independent studies program where I had to do all my own work. We had, a tutor on the road with us, but a lot of that was me teaching myself. For every textbook that one student would receive, I was doing 2 or 3 just to finish that one subject. It was very hard. It was very difficult. But those are the dues that you pay.
One of the things that you learned, and I think this is a lesson that most vocalists or most entertainers don't learn, early on, you knew the importance of a team
Yes,
because you knew what was behind the music. you know,
absolutely.
and and that's so important because that's the hardest thing. A lot of really talented musicians and vocalists that I've seen, they don't get the joke. They don't understand the importance of a team. That you
That's
could be the
important.
greatest vocalist in the world and no one will ever hear of you. You know,
Right, right.
and
Which
you know,
so
and
many are. We live in a
yeah,
world, and I live in Los Angeles, California currently. I'm constantly surrounded by talent. And I mean, people flock to Hollywood with the dream, but they don't flock to Hollywood with the know-how,
yeah,
and or the work acumen. Like you have to put in the work. It's not going to fall in your lap. That's not how this business works. This show business is the hardest business I've ever worked in. I mean, I completely the hardest business you could ever work in. It's what is required for you to succeed now is far more than what was required even when I began. See, because when
absolutely.
I was signed to a major label that did a lot of the legwork for you. You had A&R departments, you had marketing departments, you had all these people working on your behalf. Now, as a solo entity in this particular industry, you have to be all of those things for yourself. And
Yes.
so that's the work that you really have to put in. That's what's required.
If somebody who's out there who's listening in on the show who may be a young musician or a young vocalist, and one of the key factors that you've been talking about this whole time is networking,
Yes,
and that's a full-time occupation besides singing.
absolutely.
So what
I
do
never
you?
slept, I never slept when I was
Yeah,
young. And
yeah,
that's something that if I were to a lot of people say, well, how do I break into this thing, and how do I start my musical career? I always tell people a few things. First of all, be excellent, train, learn your craft. It's very important. Study, you know. Networking is important. Don't be lazy. Don't expect for anything to fall into your lap. Again, I was working a full-time job in the mornings into the early afternoons, and then I would be working from in the club scene all night long. I would sleep like 2 hours a night, at the most, sometimes coming in from the club at 2:30 to lay my head down till 4:30 because I had to be at work at 5:45.
You know, yeah, there's a truth to this, Jason.
Mhm.
My career has been in education, it's been in finance, and then it's been in music and entertainment and radio. And early on, when I had a mentor, and I was get going for my doctorate, the first thing he said, "I'm going to give you the secret to success. Don't sleep."
Don't sleep.
And he said, then he started rattling off all the CEOs, all the great, people who've written books. And he told me that on average they sleep 2 to 4 hours a night. And you think that they don't have to because they've arrived. They never arrive.
No,
That's why they always are on top of their game. And
absolutely.
so what you're talking about in entertainment applies to any industry.
Absolutely.
If you want to have high standards, it takes work, and if you want to work, don't sleep.
Don't
Because,
sleep.
and
Well, I mean, work has to,
yeah,
because there's always work to be done. Our brands are ever evolving. Even
yes,
now, I'm evolving my brand as a solo artist, getting my I's dotted and my T's crossed. It's something that is constant evolution, especially in today's society where social media is such a huge influence on how we receive everything, art, entertainment, everything. So it's about understanding the times that you're living in. It's about understanding what the requirements are for that time and putting in the work to make sure that you stand a chance, in this ever changing industry.
well, you're hitting something else on the head too. The pace of change in this industry in the past 3 years has
Yes.
been enormous. People, don't even have a concept of how fast it's changed. It's moved away from any form really of digitized music to
Right.
nothing but streaming. But
Yeah.
there are records, tapes, CDs, DVDs. This
They're all a thing of the past.
yeah. The only thing that seems to have traction is vinyl.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Incidentally, like that's
yeah.
crazy enough. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but everything else has been digitized, and in a digitized world, payment has really dramatically changed. And when that changes, then it trickles down, and the whole industry changes. So I think that one of the things you're pointing out is if you want to be successful in the entertainment industry, not only is it a lot of hard work, but you have to be very conscious of the rapidly changing environment and the team. The way managers used to be paid when they had legacy acts, they could afford to take 10% because the legacy acts were bringing in CDs and record
Right.
sales, and
Right.
so it worked. But now, if you're a manager and you think that the average person in the music industry makes about $50,000 to $60,000 a year on average. So if you're going to be a manager and take 10%, what are you going to work for $6,000 a year? How much work are you
Right.
going to do for that artist? So the
Right.
relationship between artist and management is changing very rapidly, and
Absolutely.
and the artists don't get it. They it, it's a tough business, and I think that's one of the things you're saying.
It is a
So I think,
business.
yeah,
And that's the thing. You have to have a business mindset. You have to understand that this is, for as good as you may be as a singer or a musician, this is the music business. This is not the music shed.
yeah,
Like it's, you have to have a business mindset, and you have to understand how the things work. I do everything for myself. I'm self-managed. I'm in my contracting company. I've just built excellent relationships with people, stagehands who have grown into producers on shows now, and they remember kindness, and they remember the relationships. So it's very important, like you're saying, and like I've been saying, to form a network, and don't despise the small beginnings. We're all in this track of evolution together. We're all climbing together. And when you're good to people, and when you're kind to people, and when you produce excellent work, people remember that. I've gotten so many calls where they said, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me. We did something together about 6 years ago. I've never forgotten you though. I got a program now. I want you to sing on it." Or, and that's kind of how that works.
Yes.
You just got to really put in the work.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pay you a compliment. Howard Stern has always called himself the king of all media, but Jason, you can challenge that crown. I mean, you work in all different media. Tell everybody how you went from the studio and touring. How did you get into the TV industry? How did that happen?
I have a really good friend. Her name is Angie Fisher. She's also a Grammy nominated vocalist. And I remember when I was very young in the industry, again, just forming those bonds, she would reach out to me for studio sessions. And because I've always been the person to, like, I want us all to win. I'm not a jealous person. I think that there's enough room for us all because I believe that your gift just makes room for you. And so she would reach out to me and, hire me for studio sessions, some with David Foster, some with different, she is really affiliated in that way. And I took chances with Angie, like, listen, if you ever need any other singers, I know a ton of great singers who you could bring in for the sessions. And, so it went from that to I was co-contracting some of these big things with her. And that kind of let people see me in a different light, that I had the ability to not only produce the sound, but I have the business acumen as well. I have my industry mom. Her name is Maxie Anderson, one of our legends in the music industry. She's sung on hundreds of films and contracted, and she taught me. She would sit me down and say, "Now, baby, this is how you fill out a session report. This is how you submit reports to the production houses. This is," so and again, because of how I was a sponge. I never took any of those lessons for granted. I remembered everything, and I would just try to be excellent. So it was basically switching the narrative, taking a chance, inserting myself in a way that let people know, hey, I want to do more. And I was just blessed enough to be around people who took a chance on me. And when you take a chance on me, I'm going to succeed. You see? And so it started to allow people in Los Angeles, Hollywood to see, oh, he's not just a singer. He puts together groups of singers. He also can fill out proper paperwork. He knows the business side of everything. And you can trust him to do the work well. And again, one opportunity done well will afford you multiple opportunities past that point.
Yeah,
So,
you're pointing something else out, Jason, that it's part of what success is, and this is something for any of the young musicians or vocalists listening in. It's not just knowing the business; it's learning how to think about the business,
absolutely.
and that's two separate things. Knowing it and then understanding it.
Right.
It takes a lot of work, a lot of acumen.
Well, because there's a lot that you don't know as a young
Yeah,
singer.
exactly.
Coming to this industry is challenging, but then having to learn all of the other things is also a big challenge. You want to make sure to know how to file paperwork. You want to know what the scales are through the union. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, and you need to know what the newest scales are. They change yearly, and what you should be paid, because this is a shark's business. So they will take
Yes, it
advantage of
is.
those who don't know. So it is our duty as musicians, as singers, as performers to do the research, to do the homework, to understand what all this stuff is, ask the questions, show up for the meetings, and make your presence known.
I've spoken to a lot of young musicians, and I try to give them a visual to understand the changes that have taken place in the industry. And it
Mhm.
went from the great white sharks, which were the record labels and the radio and the FM radio stations, and now it's the piranhas. Now it's schools of predators
I
that are
mean,
out there. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
weird, and
Yeah.
if you don't know what you should be making, and if you don't
Yeah.
know what to demand, they will absolutely take advantage of you. And I see so many who are getting, for lack of a better term, screwed over, because
Yeah.
they just don't know what they should be requiring, what they should be asking for. You have to understand it's not just about your gift. It is a business, and you have to learn the business.
Yeah, and the music business is not a hobby. If you want to do it as a hobby, knock yourself out. But if
Yeah,
you want to really do it as a career, it's a whole other level. So
absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about some of the work you did in the studio, and then I want to play a couple of the songs that you did backgrounds on. But you
Yeah,
worked in the studio. You worked in the studio with Whitney Houston, Barry Manilow, Lenny Kravitz, Seal. You know, are there any? Is there any of those sessions that sticks out in your mind as being pivotal in your development?
pivotal. I
Yeah,
would say, honestly, um, some of those early recordings that I did with Walter Afanasieff. He was producing for artists like, like Barry Manilow and Johnny Mathis, and I'm on those records. And when you say pivotal, for me that means shape shifting almost.
yeah,
um I understood from those sessions what was required in all future sessions. There's a level of skill that you have to have, but I also watched Johnny Mathis come in the studio at his age, coming in still singing beautifully spot on, and just understanding, oh, okay, this is what is required if you want this thing. So going into all of the sessions that I've been blessed to sing with tons of icons in this industry. There's a requirement for excellence, but you also have to make sure that you are agile. And I don't. I would say some of those. Just to answer your question, I would say some of those early studio sessions with Walter Afanasieff back then. I would say maybe that was like 2007 or 6 or 7. Kind of shaped exactly what it is that I needed to learn, because from then on, I knew exactly how it is that I was supposed to enter the studio. They don't like playing around. They don't like time is money.
yeah.
you know
Studio
so
time. Yeah.
studio time is money, so when
Yeah.
you're in these sessions, they want you to get it right the first time.
Let
And
me.
so
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but kind of what I want to find out. Do you prepare any differently if you're going to do backgrounds for Lenny Kravitz or you're going to do them for Johnny Mathis? Is your preparation any different?
no, because I'm a full range
Okay.
vocalist. I sing every style that there is to be sung. So how it is that I always but I'm also a teacher of voice. So I understand the importance of proper vocal etiquette, taking care of your instrument, and the proper vocal warm-ups, and strengthening to be done even before you enter into studio setting. Again, time is money. So when you're getting into the studio, they want the thing, they want it fast, they want it right. You see? So it is making sure that you are rested. And that's why I don't do a lot of partying. That's why I don't do a lot of carrying on. So on this road, that I work on, and when I'm in studio sessions, you don't have a lot of time to mess around. And if you take your extra time to party and play and do those things, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you have to keep your instrument in its top-notch shape. I work on a show called The Voice very often, and I sit on their bandstand. And we were in sessions. Some of those sessions, you leave from a 12-hour working day on The Voice, and then you're going to the studio directly after, and you have to make sure that you can still produce sound. So it is about learning your instrument, strengthening it, and making sure that it's at its best case scenario.
I want to play one of the songs, and I wanted to start with, I'll call him your mentor, with Rahsaan.
I love
And
Rahsaan. Yes,
yeah, and the song, I have the song "Spend the Night,"
yes.
and
This
so
was from a live recording we did in Los Angeles. It's called Live at the Belasco. And Rahsaan has a career that spans, he was on he was a Star Search winner. He was on Kids Incorporated. You know, like he was on all of these shows as a young person. So his career started literally in the 80s. He has a huge catalog, but this is honestly one of my favorite songs that we get to sing together. He's a storyteller, and so yeah.
So let's play it, then you can comment on it afterwards.
Okay. I love this song so much. I love it now.
Yeah. You know, Jason, you know, one of the things that people don't necessarily always appreciate the importance of background vocalists they sing the chorus, they sing the hook sometimes. The vocalist wouldn't have that presence oftentimes without the background vocalist. They
Absolutely.
oftentimes make the track, you
Yeah,
know, and
absolutely. And this particular song is a wonderful example
yeah,
because of how much we add to the story, you know, and it's amazing. Yeah,
it
this
isn't.
particular song, you know, I always get happy when I hear that song. Rahsaan Patterson was just I learned so much from Rahsaan. He taught me how to really take a stage. He taught me how to emote and really express the emotion of the lyric. So that was amazing opportunity. I was on that particular recording. It was myself, Angie Fisher, who I had mentioned before, and an artist called Trina Broussard singing the background vocals on that record. It was just a magical night.
Yeah, you mentioned Angie Fisher. The other Fisher I think about is Lisa Fisher, and how Lisa sang for years, for 20 years. You know, I mean, the Rolling Stones wouldn't be the Rolling Stones without Lisa.
Listen. I'm trying to tell you, if she didn't sing "Right
Yeah,
Murder," listen,
yeah.
it was a rap. She
And
took it and just made it something that was fantastic. Lisa Fisher is one of our icons.
yeah, and you know, and Mick Jagger brought her out front because she was so good.
Yeah,
You know,
he has to showcase her.
yeah, you know. So you know, the whole unsung background vocalist tradition is something that needs more attention. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later because I know there's another project that you know you're working on too. But
Mhm.
break down a typical day for me, Jason, and for everybody listening. What's your typical day like, if there's
It,
such a thing?
okay, well, I can give you each day is different. Okay, because each day is if I'm in Los Angeles working in studios, that's one thing. If I'm on the road, it's another thing. I'll give you some touring days. You know, we flew in yesterday morning to New York City. The evening prior to that, we had done 2 shows in Boston. So we flew in yesterday morning to New York and landed, went immediately to the hotel where we were basically had just enough time to drop off our bags into our hotel rooms to get to the venue because sound check starts, you know, hours before the doors start. Now, if the show times are 6 and 9, doors are going to be at 5. So that means our sound check times are happening early afternoon, and they take sometimes several hours to get the sound right at these venues. So yesterday literally was drop the bags in the hotel, grab what you're wearing for the shows this evening, take them down to the venue, and we were there for the entire rest of the evening. So it goes from sound check right up until they open doors. And while they're opening doors, that short hour in between when they open doors and when the first show begins is what you have time to get ready for and prepare yourself for a 2-show evening. And you know, the shows last evening, they were amazing, they were incredible. And you know, one starts at 6 and we're on stage till 7:30, sometimes 8 o'clock, and then just having that brief turnover time for the club until they get the next audience in, and then we do it all again at 9. So I didn't get out of that club until nearly midnight last evening, and came back to. So that's kind of how the days go on the road. You know, you're in it depends on if you're doing, like we're doing a lot of our travel by flying. If you're on bus tours, it's different. You know, as soon as you're done with the show, you shower, you change, you get on the bus, and then you're driving to the next city. So it is a constant grind. It's a high pace. It's one that requires you to be in good mind and pretty good health as well, because there's a lot, you don't get a lot of rest.
Yeah, you know that's one of the things that is so important. You mentioned Johnny Mathis earlier, and you know his voice was still on key. Smokey Robinson in his 80s, and, you
Absolutely.
know, and you know, but these guys they understand how they need to take care of their instrument. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not all partying. It's,
No,
if you
it's
know,
not.
yeah, and you need to really maintain your health. You know, nutrition, eating on the road is a pain in the neck.
Well,
you
it's
know?
hard because
Yeah,
it tends to be one. You're not able to necessarily eat at sound reasonable hours. So it's not like breakfast hour or lunch hour or dinner time by 6. A lot of the time when people are having their meals, we're on stage performing. So you're kind of trying to find what is available to you at the late hours, and it's not always the best options. So you have to be mindful of that. Stay hydrated, stay rested as much as possible, and just understand that this is part of the grind.
yeah, and you get fed in the green room, but who a lot of times you don't want to eat between sets,
No, well,
so
as a singer, I
yeah,
don't eat. I don't
yeah,
eat prior to or in between
yeah,
sets. So
yeah.
my food will have to come after the
It's
show's over.
tough. It's
It's tough.
tough. Okay, let's change gears for a second. I want to talk about television.
Yeah.
Um, you've performed at the Grammys, the Academy Awards, Voice, American Idol, Dancing with the Stars, X Factor, Modern
Yeah.
Family, Parenthood, Little Big Shots, the American Bible Challenge, Kennedy Center. I mean, I can go on and on. The ESPYS. Tell us about that. How did you fit that in with studio work and touring? How do you
Um,
make these work?
well, you make them work because you want to do them.
Because you want to work.
You want to work, and you want to continue to work. So these are calls that don't come as frequently because some of these award shows only happen once a year. But whenever the calls come, there's a lot to it. The shows that I worked more regularly on that require, I worked on The Masked Singer for several seasons as a house vocalist. So I was I was on stage from seasons 3 to 8, and I've worked on the show even since then. Like they season 10 was just wrapping, and I worked on the show this particular 10 seasons. Well, I did a few episodes with the show as well. My schedule didn't allow for me to be a part of it full time as I was for the previous seasons, because my touring schedule is picking up and I'm kind of shifting gears. But you have to make time, and you make choices about what you can do, what you can't do. And again, it requires something different because when the cameras are on, you have to be on. And there are when you're in these production houses and the lights are on, the audiences that are there, you just have to be excellent. You got to work hard and make sure that you're hitting your cues. They don't take lightly to mistakes. So you got to get it right and get it right the first time.
I guess I don't want to be repetitive, but I guess I'm trying to sort out a little bit
Mhm.
about, you know, how is television different from studio and different from live?
Television is different because it's organized and scheduled in different ways. When you're taping an episode of, say, The Masked Singer, for case example, we are given a list of the songs and of the material, which changes almost every day, and we perform with the contestants. And so there's camera blocking rehearsals, there's vocal rehearsals, there's live blocking rehearsals, there's live taping rehearsals, and then all of these things take place before they even load the audience. So you've done the show and you've recorded and you've rehearsed and you've done so many times before they even load the audience in. But that's necessary for the productions because they have to get angles, cameras, different lighting. It's very important in that way. Studio, you're just going in. You're in a studio. You got a mic there, and you have your sheet music, or whatever it is that the session requires, and you're just singing. It doesn't require you to be as the hours that you do for television as directly opposed to that of studio are completely different. When you are putting together a television production, there's a lot more. There's a lot more that you have to get done.
A lot more pieces.
A lot more pieces.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how those things are different. Film is different as well. When I've recorded for film, it's been studio sessions, and then it's a studio and film are similar. I would say the big differences are television productions when you're working on the television shows, and live performances. Obviously, that requires a whole different bag.
Let's switch back to live for a minute. I'm just curious about something. In terms of how the various artists that you go on tour with, how they organize their shows, how the musical directors work. Like for example, if you're working with Jennifer Lopez, or you're working with Kenny Latimore, or you're working with Gerald Albright. I mean, they're radically different kinds of vocalists, and
Yeah.
yeah. But there's a process. Is the process any different because of their differences, or is it
Well,
fairly much?
you know what the difference is, Mel? Is
Yeah.
the music. The music is the difference. So you, as the artists who are coming in to support these particular artists, like when I was doing Jennifer Lopez's, I did her residency with her in Las Vegas, and she's a hard worker. The rehearsal schedules are intense because it is it's almost like a Broadway production. The lights, the cameras, the moving pieces, the set changes, all of
That's
these
what I was
things.
trying to get at. Yeah.
There are hundreds of people who work to get these productions moving and up and running and successful as they are. So you are like with her, we were in rehearsals where there were choreography rehearsals and there were markings as to what the stage was going to be even before we got to the stage. So we're in like just a big sound studio where there's literally just tape on the floor saying, this is where this piece is going to be. This is where this piece is going to be. This is how much room you'll have. This is what you have to do. And this is where you move for this particular song. This is the choreography for this particular song. And this is how you have to dance and move at this time. So, and then you're off stage and then you're doing a outfit change. And then you got to be back on for the next number. But there's a lot that goes into that. But as that would relate to like a Gerald Albright, when I was on tour with him, it's really every show has its own different preparation. It depends on the magnitude of the show. Like certainly the show the difference between a Jennifer Lopez and a Gerald Albright, those are two completely different shows.
That's my point.
So it just requires you to just see what is necessary for that particular gig that you're on, and then just jump in. Again, with like some of the bigger names that I've worked with, like the J-Los, they have huge productions. And Gerald Albright has a more broken down production because he's more about the music. He's a musician and gets on there, and it's about having a good time and making this music great for the people and bringing energy and vibrance to the stage. So that's kind of the difference.
Well, that's great. I think you did a great job explaining it, and that's really what I was after, because I know that the productions and the focus has got to be different for Jennifer Lopez and Gerald Albright. And I was wondering, as in your role, where you're coming into all of these, and adaptation is the key. It's your ability to adapt on your feet and be able to understand what's being required. It's a really special talent, Jason. And I mean, all the background singers that are successful, but the ones that are successful in music, have they done television for the most part, and as you have, or do they really stay more in their own lane?
A lot of the successful ones that we mentioned, like the Lisa Fishers, like the people like that, they're not just touring musicians. You'll hear them singing on records. You'll hear them singing on commercials. You'll hear them singing on jingles. You'll hear them singing. You want to be as full range as possible, because our industry is it's not one that is like, oh, clock in, clock out. You'll be paid 40 hours at the end of the week. So you have to take the work as it comes. And there are waves in this industry. Sometimes it's a lot of work, and then sometimes there are dry seasons. A lot of at the end of the fiscal years for a lot of the production houses, they're not spending money. So, you have to find work in different ways. So we all do the most that we can. I'll say that.
Got it. I know you're performing tonight with Lalah Hathaway. I
am. I'll be.
Yes, I want to play a little.
45 minutes.
I want to play a little Ghetto Boy for everybody.
Please.
Okay.
Please.
I'm going to do it right now, and then you can comment on that afterwards.
Thank you.
ghetto boy, playing in the ghetto street. What you gonna do when you grow up and have to face responsibility? Will you spend your days and nights in a pool room? Will you sell caps of madness in the neighborhood, little ghetto boy? You already know how rough life can be, 'cause you see so much pain and misery. Little ghetto boy, your daddy was blown away. He robbed that grocery store. Don't you know that was a sad, sad old day? All your young life has seen such a misery and pain. The world is a cruel place to live and it ain't gonna change. You're so young, you've got so far to go. And I don't think you'll reach your goal, young man, hanging around the pool room door. Look out, y'all.
The music break now. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Little ghetto boy, when you become a man, you can make things change. Hey, you just take a stand. You've got to believe in yourself and all that you do. You've got to fight to make it better. Then you'll see how others will start believing too. Then, my son, things will start to get better. Hey, everything has got to get better. I believe in everything. Everything has got to get better. Everything got to get better. And I know in my heart, got to get better. Everything has got to get better. Everything has got to get better. I'm depending on you. Everything has got to get better. Hey, everything has got to get better. Got to get better. Everything has got to get better.
I love that record, Mel. I
Great
love that
song.
record so much. I love it so much. You know,
Great
that
track.
is a song that that was originally done by Layla's father, Donny Hathaway.
Donnie. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And she remade it, and she won the Grammy Award for it. So it was a special full circle moment for us all, because you know those are certain moments in time. You know, like, can you imagine your father, an iconic soul legend,
Yeah.
you know, having recorded a song that you would essentially record 30 years later
And get a Grammy.
and win the Grammy for
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
It's fantastic. I loved being a part of that record.
That's wonderful. You know, you've had so many great experiences. You know, we're running out of time, so let's turn to your solo career. Okay.
Yes.
We talked about, you know, your song. You told me that you have working on another song for a release, an original. Why don't you tell everybody about that?
Absolutely. My follow-up single is entitled "Move On," and it's slated for mid to late fall. So I'm really excited about it, because it is one that is obviously close to my heart because I wrote it, and it is a story and a message that I think that need in this world right now. And I'm a bit nervous about it because it is the most vulnerable type of singing that I've ever done on a record. I've been recording records for 25 plus years. I've been in the studio singing on some of the best records and some of the most major productions. But this particular song, I've never sung this way on a record. It is as brass knuckles and vulnerable and just as cut to the heart as possible. And so I'm excited about it. It is a story about overcoming and moving on and finding your best life. And I can't wait for you guys to hear that. It's being mixed and mastered as we currently speak. And Mel, you'll be one of the first to hear it, I promise.
I was going to ask you that. I'd like to be able to play it,
Absolutely,
exclusively.
you'll be one of the first to hear it. I give you my word. On this live stream, you have it for the record.
Terrific. That's wonderful. Well, look, Jason, I know you got a lot to do today, and I just want to wrap up. There is another project that I'm working on with you, starting to
Yes.
work on, and why don't you tell people a little bit about that, and what they may see coming down the road.
The idea is not a lot of people do understand what it is that we have been speaking about this entire hour, which is the power of the background vocalist and everything that we provide for music. And so you and I have been discussing production of a show that basically brings the background to the forefront. It is a competition style show where we go around and we find the best new voices to essentially give our world new BGVs, background vocalists, full range vocalists, who could sing on any stage with anybody. And so again, it is a competition type show where we will bring groups of singers together from all over. We will do auditions all over to find voices, new voices, different sounding voices, to bring together to kind of work them and narrow them down to the best of those best, and offer different opportunities for those voices at the end of the competition. We don't want to give too much away, but it's a search for new voices. It is a search for talent to be showcased in a way that it wouldn't traditionally be. And it's going to be a bit of a drill course because, what I do and what all of those who do what I do, it requires a lot of work. And so there's going to be all kinds of different vocal challenges, and we're going to have a lot of special guest surprise artists to come through and offer their expertise and experience as well. And so I'm excited about offering a platform for those like myself who, when I was young, were just looking for an opportunity. It differs from some of the other vocal competition shows in the way that there's a very hands-on approach with the artists who will be coming in, and there's a very hands-on approach with the singers who will be the contestants. As a singer who does this, I know exactly what is required, and so I'm a bit of a drill sergeant, and I'm a teacher of voice, so I understand what is required. So it's going to be a fun situation, and I'm looking forward to it.
My take on it is a little different. My take on it is everybody who wants to be in music either wants to be an instrumentalist or a vocalist and be the front person. Even musicians don't say, "Well, I'm going to pick this instrument up just to be a sideman." But when you think about it, there are at least very often 2 or 3 background singers for every major performance. So there's 3 times as many background singers in the industry as there are lead vocalists.
Absolutely.
And that's the way you get your foot in the door, and that's the way you build a career without having to have, at your SUV driving around bringing all the instruments. It's a way it's a whole different approach, and you learn so much about the industry from that back door, and that back door will open the front door. And I think what we in this climate where it's so difficult to break into the music industry and be successful. This is a door where a lot of people can go through and have a wonderful career like you're having.
Absolutely.
And you know, so I think it's really a modern version of a lot of the vocal contest shows that
Right.
have been on before. This is a more current version of what's really a good way
It
to.
does allow more opportunity.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and I think that's one of the biggest things that appeal to me, because I understand having stood on so many different stages and understanding what that requires. How many doors of opportunity? I said so many times during this very interview, if you're excellent, it will always open up another door of opportunity for you.
Yeah.
So we're just looking for excellence.
Wonderful. You know, I want you to know, Jason, starting on Monday, you're going to be the featured artist on Source Radio for at least 2 to
Yes.
3 weeks, and Can't Get Enough of Your Love will be the featured song on
Thank
the
you.
station. Yeah, and we'll have a link up there for everybody to be able to purchase the song.
Yes.
So you know, that's gonna be your place on our station, and I want to thank you so much for spending that time with everybody today. You know,
Thank
and
you.
sharing a wonderful career. It's something that we've never had on this show. A whole different kind of talent, and you know, I'm just fascinated by everything you've done,
Thank you.
and I want people to know more about you now as a lead vocalist
Yes.
and a background vocalist. So, Jason,
Absolutely.
good luck tonight. It's been
Thank you very
wonderful having
much.
you.
Thank you
Okay,
so much, Mel.
and if you want to stick around for a minute, maybe we can talk afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, for everybody listening in, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I have, and you'll be hearing Jason Morales' new single that was just released a couple of months ago. It'll be the featured song on Source Radio, so be sure to tune in and listen to it. So, Jason, thanks so much and have a great day.
Thanks so much. You too, Mel.